What's going on, everybody? It's Jamel Gibbs, your family-oriented entrepreneur. Welcome to another podcast episode. This is the Business and Investing Podcast, where you learn all things business and investing related. So today we have DeAndre back. You guys are very familiar if you've been watching my podcast for any amount of time. We've done a ton of podcast episodes together. But today we wanted to bring DeAndre back on the show, real life numbers on how the HELOC can actually be affected, whether it works or not, based on the numbers. We're going to share a screen today and show you guys in real time how this thing actually works. A lot of people are still confused on how the interest works, still confused on how the HELOC can fit into their lives in general. So we're going to share the basics, the fundamentals of how the HELOC works and show you the real numbers. Now, we've done share screens before with the podcast and showing you guys the numbers and all of that and how it actually works, but we're going to go into a little more detail today, right? And the reason for that is because we're trying to debunk the questions, some of the comments that we get on our podcast episodes, so that you guys can have a better understanding of why this actually works and how it works. Before we actually get started, shout out to Gary Whitaker. He's a client of mine and DeAndre's. He went out and got a HELOC, and guess what? I know Gary's probably gonna be embarrassed when he sees this, man. But guess what? He signed up for my coaching program using the HELOC, but then we took the funds from the HELOC in order to invest into his first fix and flip, which within 1 day of him being in my program, we got that deal for him. So shout out to Gary. I'm going to have him on the podcast sometime in the near future. That's just one example. There's plenty of other examples of people who have gotten a HELOC and now they're flipping houses through my coaching program as well. But today we just wanted to share the numbers with you guys. DeAndre takes care of you guys with the HELOC. DeAndre and Anthony Russian takes care of you guys through with the HELOC situation. I take care of you on what to do with the money, how to make money with the HELOC. This is a team effort. And again, we just want to be a little more transparent with the numbers and show you guys how it actually works. So, grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, take a lot of notes on this particular episode. We're going to go into a lot of detail. And if you guys still have questions after the fact, be sure to leave a comment in the comment section so that we can get those questions addressed. DeAndre Clayton, what's up, my man?
What's going on, man? How you doing today?
Doing good, bro. Can't complain.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know DeAndre, I'm going to have him tell you a little bit about himself. Maybe you're new to my channel or whatever the case may be. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what you do and who you are, DeAndre?
Okay, so I'm widely known as an infinite banking specialist. I also run a Medicare firm as well. And throughout this journey, I just realized that there were just so many people who struggled on this aspect of how to survive after retirement, right? Or around the retirement age. They have homes that they're still trying to pay off with Social Security dollars, different things like that. And so I was always looking for different ways to benefit them in reference to debt consolidation. And of course, we had our video with Briscoe come about, and Briscoe's example really helped me to shorten the time period to help people get out of debt and start to really use their cash flow for something better without having to take on as many risks that they take on. And when I say risks, oftentimes, you hear the high risk, high reward concept. I've never really been a fan of that concept because it doesn't mean high reward. High risk means there's a high probability of losing. But the more and more education that you take in, the better off you will be long term, which makes your risk lower. Knowledge makes risk lower. So today, in essence, what we're trying to do with this HELOC method and trying to teach you is how to make this not seem risky to you, because you may have information on, you may have watched a few podcasts, and in actuality, we understand that those podcasts is teaching you the concept, right? And I'm a big data person. I don't like to sell dreams or anything like that. I like to get into the numbers. I like to get dirty with them so that you can understand, hey, this is something that me and my family could actually do and actually make happen. And once you've understood how cash flow works, how banking works, how interest works, the world becomes your oyster, really. And that's what we're trying to help people to understand today. Who should be actually applying for this loan, right? How to use this loan effectively, why the loan works, right? And full disclosure, before I see it in the comments, right, is I don't sell first position HELOCs. I don't make a commission from HELOCs. So when I'm teaching you this, you can't even bring that up in the comments. I know that's no, he sounds like a salesman. No, that's not going to be quite it. This is an educational podcast, and that's what we intend to do is educate you today.
That's right, man. So why don't we dig into this, man? Why don't we pull up the screen, start getting into the numbers, and
Absolutely.
explain why we're doing what we're doing today.
Absolutely. Now, before we pull up the screen, I just want to bring up a few different things because I know it's going to come up as people are looking at the numbers. They may not understand what exactly they are really looking at.
Hmm.
But in order to understand the HELOC method, it is imperative that you understand how interest works and how banking works. So, first, we'll just kind of talk about interest, right? So, most people they shoot down this method by talking about interest rate right away, right? Oh, the interest rate's too high. That's where they shoot it down. Well, I've said it on previous podcasts that interest is really the least important component. Interest rate is really the least important component of how interest works. And we can prove this one by one today, right? So, when I made the statement about if it was a 45% interest rate, but the balance was zero, what that's helping people to understand is that interest rate is a codependent factor.
Hmm.
It depends on other things to be dangerous, right? Which is why it can't be the most important aspect of how much a loan costs
Right.
because it's dependent upon things. So the first thing is balance. If there's a $0 balance, you don't owe money. It doesn't matter if the interest rate is 100%. And I hope we can agree on that. I hope we can agree on that, right? The second thing is time, right? So when we talk about time, you can learn that time is really more important than interest rate or anything like that because what happens when you're taking out a loan is time is measured in two different ways. It's tenure, and then you also measure time with frequency of charge. So what I mean by that is if you have a car loan, you may notice that a car loan is not a 3-year loan. It's a 36-month loan, which
Right.
means the interest payment is charged every month. That's the reason why it's designed that way. Same thing for the mortgage, right? So that's the frequency of charge aspect. Now, the time aspect, the reason why we know it's so important is we can kind of give this analogy. Jamel, you need 60 grand today, right? You go to the bank and you say, hey, look, I need 60 grand, and I expect that by the end of the month, I'm gonna be able to pay you back the full 60 grand. Would the bank loan you 60,000?
Would they loan me 60,000? They'll
Yep.
loan me the 60,000, but for somebody else, I'm not sure.
Would they loan you a 60,000 for 1 month?
No, they're gonna do it over a period of time,
They're gonna do it over a period of time. Why are they doing it over a period of time?
so it lowers the payments, and they make more money in interest.
Exactly, right? If time is not attached to interest, the rate doesn't have a chance to be charged, right? So, for instance, if you got a credit card, you go ahead and you finish off paying everything in a given month, you'll notice that you don't have a payment
Right.
going into it. There's no interest payment going into it because time is required for interest to be dangerous,
Hmm.
right? Positive or negative, right? But most of the time, people deal with time from a negative aspect when it comes to interest. Now, the third most important component of how interest works is what is the class of the interest. So is it simple interest? Is it compound interest? Is it amortized? So I want to make sure this is very clear. Most things you have in life are not simple interest. Most things,
Most things. A
most
car
things,
loan
yeah,
could, yeah,
yeah.
but most things are not. Yeah, you're right.
Most things are not simple interest. Most people, their frequency of using debt is probably in an amortized or compound interest setting,
Yep.
right? So credit cards, homes, that's kind of common, right? And so simple interest, I like to say it's simple as pie. Simple is anytime you pay debt, the best way to pay debt or the best place to pay debt in is a simple interest environment
Hmm.
because more of your money goes towards the principal. That's just that's a fact, right? Now, of course, when you talk about compound interest, the reason why it's so dangerous is because it allows itself to charge interest on top of interest. So it charges interest on the previous month, so on and so forth, or whatever that snowball effect has become. And then you have amortized interest, which kind of works at like an 80, 20, 70, 30 for the first 13 years, if we're talking about a home in particular, because that's what we're talking about today. But you have this situation where about 80% is going directly towards the
Hmm.
interest, and then about 20% is going directly
Hmm.
towards the principal. So if we focus on interest rate first, the reason why it doesn't make sense is because it's not equal. It's not an apples to apples conversation. If a person is inside of a HELOC, it's a simple interest vehicle. If you're inside of a mortgage, it is a amortized vehicle.
Not the
What
same.
it's not the same. It's not the same in regards to interest, and you'll see that today. But the other portion that I would like to make sure people understand is you have never understood interest. Most people haven't.
Mhm.
Most people understand taxes, right? So, like if I told you to go and get a Snickers bar, you kind of don't expect to pay taxes on that Snickers bar indefinitely. But if I tell you to go and get a home, you expect to pay property taxes for the entirety of the ownership of the home. That's a simple concept. But the whole concept of debt consolidation is built around the fact that you can't keep up with different classes of interest. That's what debt consolidation is for. If you go and get a debt consolidation loan, the main purpose is you got this credit card over here that charges 25% and it does it on the 22nd. You got another one that charges on the 7th. You got another one that charges, and they're all different percentages. And so you have this triggering effect of the statement balances being due at different times, and you're falling behind because you don't know how to keep up with the vast degree of interest payment and classes that you have, right? So what do? You get a debt consolidation loan, you put it all into one place, and you say, okay, I'm going to change the class of the interest, or I'm going to change the interest rate for an extended period of time. So class of the interest, I may take a simple interest loan and say, okay, I'm agreeing to 7%. I'm agreeing to 10% because I want to get rid of 20, 30, 29, 21, whatever
Right.
percentage. And I want to get rid of the compound. So what happens when you take a debt consolidation loan out? You no longer have a interest payment on the things you paid off, right? So your credit card will no longer have a minimum due balance. Now, why is this so important? Well, in a HELOC, you're consolidating your largest debt, which means there is no longer a mortgage in place. The class of interest has changed, right?
Right.
So,
So just to clarify that real quick, so you're saying, and this is just for everybody listening, if we're thinking about a HELOC versus a mortgage, you can liken a HELOC to taking out a debt consolidation loan.
yeah,
And that's not to be confused that saying that HELOC is a debt consolidation loan, because it's not. But if you're thinking along the same lines of what we're talking about, you're saying that a HELOC can be equivalent to a debt consolidation loan because of the way the interest is set up, right?
Yes, well, and to be frank, when you're talking about a first position HELOC, it is a debt consolidation loan
Mm-hmm.
because it's consolidating the mortgage. It is at least getting rid of that.
True.
It has the ability to get rid of far more things than the mortgage. So,
Mm-hmm.
even when I ran your numbers, and then I added your cars into it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it can consolidate a great deal of debt, which is normally what people would use the second position for. They might say, "Oh, I want to get my home done," or I have some credit cards out there lingering, and I want to get rid of them." Well, you're doing that because you recognize that you can't keep up with the payments that they've generated already. So you're like, all right, well, the HELOC will make that easier, and it'll make my credit profile better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a bad idea. It's smart. You're changing the class of interest. However, where people get stumped on this first position side is they just are like, well, but the mortgage has a low interest rate. So they can understand it when it comes to the credit card. They can't understand it when it comes to the mortgage, right? Now, the next thing I'll say is really important to understand this concept is banking, right? So, and this is going to be really quick.
Before we even jump into the banking part, what about those who say, the HELOC is going to have an adjustable rate? How would you, how should we address that type of question?
Well, legally, the adjustments can't be significant.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing. If you even notice today, in the HELOC example, you're going to see a 7.5% rate. Um, a lot of other HELOC lenders may start off at about 8.6, which is prime, right? Um, but the mortgages nowadays are getting close to that number as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
and so when you talk about it being an adjustable rate, here's the reason why the rate being adjustable doesn't matter as much on a HELOC as it does a mortgage. A mortgage has already scheduled your payments, right? So if that rate changes, then it's going to be a recalculation of how the interest is going to work on the loan that is going to be very unfavorable, significantly unfavorable, because 80% of your payment is going towards the interest. When you're inside of the HELOC is a priority principal payment loan. So in essence, anytime you do the strategy that we talked about, which is flowing your income through the HELOC, the principal drops by the amount that your income is right away, right? The interest is calculated after that. So kind of think of the difference of, if we were talking about how a W-2 worker is taxed versus a 1099 or a
Mm-hmm.
business owner. A W-2 worker is taxed on their gross, right? Which means they pay far more taxes than
Mm-hmm.
a 1099 person because they're taxed on their net. Now, the 1099 person can be taxed more than a W-2 person with the same income, but the only reason why that would happen is because they didn't deduct.
They didn't
Now,
write anything off.
yeah, but the law has allowed you to write off quite a bit being a
Mm-hmm.
business owner. So what happens is most write off a significant amount and they bring down what their income looks like to the government. And now the government has to tax them on that number, right?
Until you got to borrow money and then you want to keep
Until you
your
got to borrow money and then you want.
keep your income high.
I always bring that up too, because real estate investors, and when I'm doing a consult with a real estate investor, they almost don't want to tell me their income, and I'm like, I'm not in the IRS. Like, bro, just give me the numbers, man. Just give me.
Now, it benefits you to write less off when you're trying to get loans through a bank in
Right,
order to be able to buy more real
absolutely,
estate, or at
absolutely,
least establish a relationship. But once that relationship is established, it benefits to just write more stuff off legally.
absolutely. Yeah, and the HELOC may benefit you even from that standpoint a little bit better because if you gain
Mm,
access to a lot of money, you have less opportunities where you're going to be going and asking for a loan anyways,
right.
right? That's just common sense. If you're looking and you're sitting on 200, 300,000, you're probably not going to ask, hey, can I borrow 60,000 for this fix and flip? you're probably not going to do it. You're probably just going to go ahead, send the money out, continue the process of flowing your income through it, right? But as I was saying, when it comes to the 1099 worker or the business owner, they're taxed on their net. So when you're thinking about the interest payment on a mortgage, the interest payment on a mortgage is very similar to being a W-2 worker. The
Mm-hmm.
interest payment on a HELOC is very similar to being a business owner. If you're flowing all of your income through it, the principal changes all the time. So you're
Right.
not charged a flat interest rate. You can't be charged a flat interest rate on a number that fluctuates the whole month. Whereas in your mortgage, obviously, you're going to be charged a flat interest rate because you only put one mortgage payment in,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, as I mentioned, let's go towards the
But
bank.
even still, to just to debunk even the adjustable rate. So you might have an adjustable rate uh mortgage on your, you might have an
Mhm.
adjustable, well, you might have a flat interest rate on your mortgage versus an adjustable rate, but you know what's going to fluctuate it is, the taxes.
Taxes.
The
Yep,
taxes gonna
absolutely.
that's your adjustable rate right
Mhm.
there.
Yep,
You know what I mean? So your payment is gonna go,
taxes.
it's not gonna ever come down, but it's
You
gonna
ain't lying.
continue to go up.
You
That's
ain't
just
lying.
what it is,
You ain't
you
lying.
know?
I see that as a problem all the time too. That comes up in many. Like, man, my mortgage payment just went up. And it's interesting because a lot of people don't bring that up when they start thinking
Right.
about the HELOC. They're just thinking, oh, that's all bad. I'm in a fixed, but you don't live a fixed life when
At
you're in a
all.
mortgage.
That's
You
right.
don't, right? And it's important to be realistic about that, right? It's really important to be realistic about that. Now, the other thing, and I know that you and Anthony kind of touched on it, but I like to touch on it too, because some people say, well, what about me just making an extra payment on my mortgage? Okay, cool. You could make an extra principal payment on your mortgage, but that other payment still went 80% towards the interest.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
they try to say that you're going to pay it off quicker doing that. No, you wouldn't, because the other payment has been decided already.
Right.
Right. So you could try to get around it. And then the other part of it is the concept that we're teaching is really a concept of understanding how money works first. So we need to be very clear about money. Money is currency. Currency, listen to the word current, it requires movement at all times in order to stay ahead. If money stops or it stales at any point, you will be caught by inflation. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it works. Right? So there are three principles to money that we need to talk about. Those three principles to money is that money should always be doing these three things: either growing, paying off debt, or protection. If money doesn't follow any of these three principles, you have already started losing money. I can guarantee you that. So why can I guarantee that? Well, most of us are sentimental about money, which is the reason why even the concept of saying, well, I could do exactly what they're saying with my mortgage, it's not likely because psychologically you can't do it. I can't tell you how many consults I've met people and they have $20,000 of debt, but they have $45,000 of cash on hand, and they're deciding to pay the interest payment. Why? Because they're sentimental about having a certain amount of money in their
Mm-hmm.
account. Some people are like, man, I need to have at least 20,000 in my checking. I just can't go to sleep unless it's 20000, right?
There's a certain level of comfort for them to have that
It's a
much money in
level
the
of
bank.
comfort. And that level of comfort is understandable in a
Mhm.
mortgage. But when you switch over to a HELOC and your money
The
moves
money is
all the
already
time, it
there. You
doesn't
don't need
make
to save.
sense anymore, right?
Yeah.
It won't make sense anymore because all of your money is supposed to be moving. So the
Mm-hmm.
stockpiling you've been doing, you have not been that successful because when you stockpiled, your money wasn't growing. It serves as a slight protection, but not
Mm-hmm.
a big protection, right? Because if an issue happened with your house that was very detrimental, an issue happened with your health that was very detrimental, that little emergency funds is going to be Go. Right.
Yeah.
Because most people don't save 6 months of emergency fund.
Right.
Now, the third thing is it paying debt off? Money in a savings account is not paying debt off. It's not paying debt off and it's not growing, right? Um, so why is that so?
So just to stop there for a second, just to be clear on what DeAndre is saying, so that you guys can understand. All he's saying is, rather than having the emergency funds, yeah, of course, okay. So you might want to have an emergency fund, but now your HELOC plays the role of the emergency fund, your savings, and all of
It's an and
the
tool.
debt that is basically consolidated into one account
Mm-hmm.
through your HELOC.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So your HELOC now becomes your bank account, which kind of funds everything else for you. And as you pay the HELOC down or pay it off, guess what's going to happen? You're going to free up even more capital. So you don't need to save the money in an external account anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless it's an insurance policy, because
Right.
that's a
Yeah.
growing and protection vehicle, right? And so when we look at that concept, a lot of people are not aware of that concept, that money should have those three focuses,
I'll
right?
be honest, man. I've been around business for my whole life. I've been in real estate and financial sector for since the year 2000. Real estate since 2002,
Mm-hmm.
and I learned that concept through you and Anthony Russian, man.
Oh,
So
thanks, man.
it just
I
it
appreciate it.
opened up my eyes to a different way of looking at how you know money can move and how you don't need to save if you have
Yeah.
certain accounts in place like your
Yeah.
HELOC.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And it's hard to divorce the concept of a traditional bank for most people.
Hmm.
But I really ask this sobering question for people: what is your bank doing for you? What is it doing for you? Just kind of moment of silence,
Charging fees, man.
right? So most charging fees, most having a hard time gaining access to capital when you need it.
Hmm.
But here's what most people don't think about: everybody who has ever had a bank account is a private lender.
Mm.
However, you're a private lender who never chose the terms of the loan. The bank is the only one who has ever gotten away with borrowing money from people that people are giving them willingly and telling them how much they are willing to pay on the loan, which is that little interest payment that you get for $5.62 when the
Right.
year comes up, because your account is really only giving you 0.25% interest, right? So now we say, okay, well, do I really want to be in that situation, or do I want to be in a reciprocative situation? So a reciprocative situation means that when you need money, it gives it to you. When you don't have money, it can hold you over for a certain amount of time, right?
Hmm.
That's when your house becomes a home, right? Right now, your house is a house. For most people, your house is a house. And I use the analogy of, and I'm gonna get a little geeky here, right? But
Hmm.
there's these two biology components. One of them is called mutualistic relationships, rather. But one of them is called a parasite, and the other one is called a symbiote, right? So now a parasite is something that has a host and it feeds on the host the whole time. Now I can prove to you that your mortgage feeds on you. The first thing you think about if you lost your job or your income right now is, how are you going to pay the house? That comes before your family. Now you may think, well, the reason why I'm thinking about how am I going to pay the house is because I don't want my family out. But in essence, if your family didn't pop up immediately and the house came up immediately, that's a parasite. It's leeching off of you, right? Now, a symbiote, however, and I don't know how familiar Jamel is with Spider-Man.
I'm playing. I ended the game twice for my Spider-Man 2.
You bet.
Spawn.
Oh, so you got it. Yeah, all right. So Venom, right?
Yeah, Venom. I mean, I said Spawn. My bad.
So Venom is the character on Spider-Man that has a symbiote on him, And
Yeah.
in the game, what you mentioned, he actually, the guy who gets it is actually sick before
Hmm.
Venom gets it on him, before
Hmm.
Venom merges with him, right? Before the symbiote merges with him. Well, what a symbiote does is it reciprocates. So it makes it so that you love it so much that you don't want to get rid of it. And
Hmm.
that it lets you know that it needs you alive as well, right? So if at any point you die, the symbiote recognizes that, hey, I'm done for. Now, why do I bring up that analogy? Well, I bring up that analogy because your mortgage, and I can say this again, it does not care about you. There were over 100,000 foreclosures in the first quarter of 2023. Over 100,000 of them. And projected to continue being that way throughout the rest of the quarters that happened. So we'll see what the final numbers are after January. But when people say that HELOC is dangerous, I'm always kind of surprised because there's only been one foreclosure since 2014. Why am I telling you this? You have to think differently. Just because something's conventional does not make it right. Right? Does not make it right.
Hmm.
Uh, Jamel, you like mangoes?
I do.
You do? I'm
Yeah.
gonna trip you out right now. So on this concept of conventional and how we just easily go along with things in society without really questioning it.
Uh-huh.
So me and my wife, we went to a Mexican restaurant a few weeks ago, or actually, no, it was actually a month and a half ago. But when we went there, there was a dessert called sopapilla tropical. And
Sopa who?
Sopapilla tropical. And
Okay.
basically what it was it was hot mangoes um cooked like apple pie, like so brown sugar, cinnamon, the whole nine in the mangoes, and then there was ice cream on top, and then there was like these little tostados or whatever they call them on the top, sprinkled with brown sugar and cinnamon on those as well. And me and my wife were looking at each other while we were eating this in amazement and confusion at the same time because we were like, I know what I ordered, but what is this we eating? What is this hot stuff, right? What is this hot stuff? And we was like, it's mangoes. And then we started thinking, have we ever had mangoes hot? And she said, no, I ain't never had mangoes hot. I said, yeah, we only eat them raw or we put them in a smoothie. That's it. And then I started going to bakers and I asked them, do you like mangoes? They said, oh, mangoes is one of my favorite fruits. I keep like eight
Hmm.
or 10 of them in the house at all times. And I said, have you ever baked with mangoes? Have you ever made a dessert with mangoes? Every last one of them said no. I said, well, why not? I just never thought about it.
What restaurant is that, by the way?
Oh gosh, man, it had some name with oh god, it was a long name. It was like Tikatuka.
It was here. It was local.
It was in King. It was in King, North Carolina.
Okay,
So
I got you.
it was a little far, a little far. But yeah, so after asking like five different bakers, all of them said, I've never cooked with mangoes, but I love mangoes. It's one of my
Hmm.
favorite fruits. And what that told me was that there are so many things in society that we just take for face value and we allow it to just move us in a certain direction, right? That even the things that we would think would be awesome, we just nah, that I'm good on that. And
Hmm.
so one of them, she made a mango cobbler after I brought this to her attention. She said her husband was like, "Yo, that's the only dessert we need in the house from now on."
Hmm.
Right? But I say all this because if your mind is listening to this podcast and you're like, "Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, it doesn't work," ask if you're saying it doesn't work simply because you haven't seen it or you don't know people who have done it, or because you actually know the math behind it, right? And so, with that being said, now we'll go into the math because I wanted you guys to have that whole premise of understanding those things before we go into the calculation. So, this is a calculation that I ran just this maybe 2 weeks ago or so. And let me know if I need to zoom in a little bit, Jamel.
All right, it looks good for now. I
Looks
think
good?
you're good, bro. Yeah, like that.
Sure? Okay. All right. So this is a person who is in a home, principal loan 270,000. He actually has only been in the home for, and actually let's do this because it wasn't he's only been in the home for 2 months, right?
Okay.
He's only been in the home for 2 months. Now, I'm running this calculation just so you guys see the difference on the numbers when you're looking at flush numbers. So his mortgage is 270,000. His interest rate is 6.6%. Now, we will fluctuate this just to prove this true for you guys because you might say, "Oh, that's just so high. Why would he even run that?" We're going to run it lower as well. But I want you to see the original, what his real numbers actually are right now. Now his homeowner's insurance is $145 a month. His property taxes is $379 a month, and he's paying $250 on his PMI because it's a new home and that's the loan that he got into, right? Now, if we look on this other side, his family has a net income of $8,500. That's after the 401ks go out and everything else, the taxes and everything. Now his average monthly expenses is $3,000. Now I know the first thing you guys are gonna say is, "Ain't nobody only spending $3,000." Well, that's because you're including the mortgage payment. You're probably including the mortgage payment. And in this situation, as I mentioned earlier, when we consolidate using the HELOC, the mortgage payment is no more. So this is his expenses outside of the mortgage payment. All right. Now, annual homeowners insurance, this is the same. Taxes is the same. He just doesn't have PMI on this particular loan. Now, I want to drop down and show you the difference between what is happening in this guy's life with the suggestion of moving into a HELOC. All right. So he is on track for paying $618,427.21 on his mortgage with the 29.83 years that he has left. His mortgage payment is $2,501 currently, and we know that's going to go up, as Jamel mentioned, because of taxes. It's going to continue going up. But look at the interest that he's paying on that. He's paying $348,427.21 on $270,000. So his total interest is 129.05%. Well, I thought it was a 6.6 interest rate.
Hmm.
Whoa, what happened to it being 6 point? Right? Now, if you look at this other loan, which is the HELOC, you're noticing the total interest on the loan is 21.87%. Now, why is it that? It's that because he is flowing his income through this vehicle. It makes more sense for him because his savings account automatically grows because a savings account is actually the equity in the house now, right? But and I want to make sure this is clear. Don't do this if you are not going to follow this advice to actually flow your income through it. It does not make sense. If you're thinking from a payment to payment standpoint, this is not for you. It is not going to be for you, right? But if you're wanting to get ahead, finish paying off your property quickly, and actually use money the way it's intended, perfect for you, right? Now, his interest paid on that $270,000 is equating to $59,036.15. Now, hold on now. But the interest rate is 7.5. Whoa. How's a 7.5 performing that way? Now, I am going to compare a lower interest rate to this, but I want you to focus on this first. If you notice, it mentions that he's paying the house off in 5.42 years, and he has an interest, total interest of 21.87%. Right? So, what does that mean? Well, if you took this 21.87% and you divided it by the 5.42, you would get that his payment is actually 4.035% a year. That's how much interest he's paying on this loan per year, because he decided to continue chopping the principal down. The interest payment had to be commensurate with the average daily interest calculation. Now, that doesn't equate to 7.5%. It's not equating to 7.5% because of the fluctuation of the actual principal number constantly, right? Now, this number is for those who say, oh, no, high interest rate. Da, da, da. This is if we made this a 30-year loan. So this is saying if this loan lasted for 30 years at this rate of interest that they were charged, total interest that they would charge, it would equate to 1.4084%. Now, Jamel, do you know any mortgage today that you could get for 1.4084%?
No, it is impossible, man.
Not at all, right? This is because this is how numbers work. So I want to make sure this is clear. Now when we drop down and we really get into the gritty details, Jamel, do you need to zoom in a little bit more here?
That's a little bit, yeah.
All right. How is that?
That's perfect.
Perfect. All right. So I want you to notice something about the interest payment on the house here. And we're just going to use 2 years as the barometer. So 2 years, which is month 24. So it starts off, the interest payment starts off at 1.485.
And to be clear, this is on the regular mortgage.
This is on
right?
the regular mortgage, right?
And also, guys, remember, keeping this in mind, all things being fair, this is on somebody's actual. These are somebody's actual numbers.
This is somebody's
real
actual numbers.
This is not theory, okay?
Yeah. No theory here at all, right? So in the first 2 years, the interest payment only dropped by $32.60. Well, why is that? Because interest rate is a codependent factor. The principal isn't dropping that much, therefore the interest rate doesn't drop that much, right? Now, when we talk about a priority principal loan, which is the HELOC, now we see, okay, interest payment is $1,687.50. So you're right. Yes, it's going to be a higher payment initially because it's 7.5 in comparison to 6.6. Okay, I agree with that, right? But let's see how much it drops by in that same 2-year span.
And while you're doing that, a lot of people might say, where am I going to get the money to pay that higher payment? It's coming out of the money you already make anyway. You understand what I mean? So rather than paying off your bills through your regular payments, you're paying the bills, you're paying everything through the HELOC. So you're sending the money to the HELOC, and then from there you pay your bills like you normally would. Right. So it's just a shift in thinking of how you actually operate your money in order to be able to make this work.
Correct. And remember, there was a removal of the mortgage. So there was a removal of the mortgage note. The mortgage note is not the same as the interest payment. It's interest plus principal.
So imagine, so just imagine a world, guys, where you receive a paycheck and you don't cash the check and then pay your bills. What you do is you cash the check, or you just send the check directly into your HELOC. Mm-hmm. Then you pull the money from your HELOC in order to be able to pay your debts and be able to live how you live. You want to go out and eat, or whatever the case may be. That's this type of setup. That's exactly what you're doing. And that's how you're going to be able to pay that house down in 5 years, this particular person, versus 30 years or 29 and a half years using the the regular mortgage route.
Exactly, exactly. So now the difference on the interest payment here, first month, $1,687.50. And when we drop down to the 24th month, that is $1,138.69. It dropped by $548.81 in the first 24 months, in the first 2 years, right? So which one do you think obviously is going to pay the property off quicker? One is paying down $32 on the interest, dropping the interest payment by $32 in 2 years. The other one's dropping it by $548.81 in 2 years. Obviously, the one that is dropping it by 548.81
Right.
is going to succeed, right? Now, we can even take it from a yearly interval. From a yearly standpoint, the equity that's gained is $47,636.47 for this client, right?
One more thing I want to bring out, man. Not to cut you off, but a lot of people, I've been reading the comments. A lot of people have been saying, "Hey, yeah, this only works if you're truly disciplined. Disciplined. Very, very true. It works when you're
Mm-hmm.
disciplined, right? But a mortgage only works when you're disciplined as well. The only
Fact.
difference is you're paying more interest over a period of time for a lower interest rate because you think that the interest rate is benefiting you. Yeah, it's helping you from a standpoint of the way you're operating your finances right now, but in reality, you're paying a whole lot more money in interest. You're literally paying the bank,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're paying the bank just to have a lower interest rate and that peace of mind, thinking that your lower
So
payment is helping you. It ain't.
in,
You know what I
in
mean?
essence, you're paying the bank to be irresponsible.
You're
I
paying the
I
bank to
I
yep.
hate that concept of saying this only works when you're disciplined. The problem is you shouldn't think outside of discipline.
Guess what? And guess what? If you're not disciplined with your
Nothing
mortgage, you're gonna
works.
you're gonna get foreclosed on.
Nothing works if you're not disciplined. This
So you
this
got
is
to be
not the only.
disciplined either way, right?
Absolutely, which I think is the number one problem that I hear. It's always a scarcity mindset, as if people can't actually, get on the road, sit down, and say, "Hey, this is what I'm supposed to do." I'm going to let you guys know right now. I'm not the Dave Ramsey guy. Y'all have seen the episode. I am not going to tell you you're too
I'll post that
stupid,
video up at the top for
right?
everybody to check out.
I'm not going to tell you you're too stupid to do the right thing.
Mm,
I'm going to give you a vote of confidence that when you see the truth of the numbers, you will make a decision that says, you know what, that's going to cost me over $200,000 more. If I'm not disciplined now, I see the reason I should be,
mm.
right? And oftentimes, a lot of my appointments turn out that way. Well, maybe it's not a fit for a person right now because they are not disciplined. But when they look at the numbers, they're like, "Dang, I'm gonna call you back in
I
six
don't, I
months."
don't, I don't
Right?
know if I agree that it takes discipline. I just think it takes a mental shift,
It takes a
a
mental
shift in
shift.
how you think about money,
Hmm.
because you got to be disciplined either way. You got to be disciplined with a mortgage. You got to be disciplined with a HELOC. It's just especially in America, as Anthony brought out, other countries are using this, flawlessly, right? But in
Hmm.
America, we're sold the idea of having a lower mortgage payment. We're sold the idea of the way we operate, amortized mortgage, right?
Hmm.
So that's all. When something is all you know, then you tend to gravitate toward that particular situation in order to be able to make yours work. I think that this just takes a mental shift on it takes a shift on how you think about finances and how you're thinking about your mortgage and things like that in
Hmm.
order to be able to really operate under this type of because it doesn't really take any extra ounce of discipline. It just takes a different
For,
thought process on you how
yeah,
you structure your finances. That's really all it is, man.
for most, it doesn't. For some, it does,
Mm,
right?
mm.
And so, what I mean by that
That's
is,
fair.
I've found that people who have maybe lost a job before, they are far more disciplined than people who have never lost a job before.
Mm,
So naturally, when they go through their numbers, they're so serious about their numbers because they've had to go to the ramen noodle stage before, and they're like, "Hey,
Mhm.
look, we not going
Tighten them belts, man.
we tightening belts, right?" And so, if I'm frank with you, even though I say I'm not the Dave Ramsey guy, those people who prescribe to Dave Ramsey, this would work for them 100% of the time.
Hmm. They have more discipline. That's
This will
true.
work for them 100% of the time because he's creating such an environment that makes you like, hey, I can't go on vacation. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. That this will be your saving grace. You would be out of
Mhm.
debt way faster if you applied the same mindset and then you took it here, because what he's not doing is getting into numbers. He's giving you
Mhm.
simple theories about how to pay debt off. Look, you don't have to be brilliant to know that you need to stop going out to eat as much if you don't have the money. I mean, that doesn't take a genius that you're spending a lot of money at McDonald's, you're spending a lot of money at Chick-fil-A or wherever you're going, or you're spending a lot of money buying change, jewelry, so on and so forth. It doesn't take a genius to show you, hey, this is why you have a leak in your boat from a financial standpoint. What takes a genius is helping you to understand how to be efficient, right? And that's what this conversation is about. It's not simply just about paying debt off, it's about how to be efficient while you pay debt off, which
Mm.
allows you to go and after opportunities like what you mentioned with Gary earlier, right? He was not in this situation where he could be making 60 or $70,000 off of a deal beforehand, right? So a lot of you who are so focused on interest rate, you're not even focused on the aspect that when you gain access to money, you gain access to opportunity that
Oh,
makes
that is
money,
100% a fact, man.
right? And if you don't grasp that, you will struggle because inside of a mortgage, there is no opportunity inside of your mortgage. Your money
Mm.
is locked up inside of it, right? Now, you might have opportunity if you are renting out a home and that home has a mortgage note on it and you're drawing a payment higher than the mortgage note, so on and so forth. Okay, that's true. But inside of your residential property, if you're in a mortgage, you're not benefiting yourself.
That's right, man.
There's no way around it when you look at this, right? And this is what he came to the conversation with. The guy who I met with, he is a scientist. He looked at
Mm.
these numbers and he was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I signed that. And when we went through the conversation, I told him exactly how his mortgage paperwork went. He went to the mortgage loan officer. They flipped the page over a little bit. They said, sign here, sign here, sign here, sign here, sign here. He had no idea he was on the hook for 618,000. He had no idea, right? So why is that so important? Wake up. Think. It is okay to think. It might not be popular to think, but it's okay to think. It is very okay to think. Don't be ashamed of saying something doesn't sound right about this. They're even talking about doing 40-year mortgages soon. Like, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
they've been talking about that for over a year at
That's
this point, man.
crazy. That's crazy.
That
But
is.
these are the numbers. And here's the funny part.
But guess who wins on a 40-year mortgage, man?
Oh,
The
all
banks are
day.
gonna
The
kill it.
bank wins all day.
They're gonna kill it, man.
So right here, month 65 is when this loan would be paid off in the HELOC.
Mm.
The interest rate on the mortgage is still $1,383.04, with the loan completely paid off in the HELOC in this situation, right? Now, if you're one of those people who want to be a naysayer, let's just play a game. What if this was 3.2%? Oh, now we're comparing 3 point. DeAndre said 3% ain't nothing. 3% he's still paying $149,415.11, which is 55.34%, and the 7.5 is still equating to a total of 21.87%. What does this mean? It means that the interest rate means far more when you're in an amortized loan than a simple vehicle that's revolving, right?
Why don't we do this? Why don't we bump that simple interest number up and see what happens?
Oh, yeah, we love doing that. So,
Because people, again, interest rate being a factor in people's minds. What if there was a 15% interest on a HELOC versus a what was it,
3.2, right?
3.2% interest on a regular mortgage?
So now we bumped it up to 15%, right? Because of the structure of this loan, you're still paying it off quicker. Now, granted, yes, are you paying more money? Yes, you are. But are you done faster? Yes, you are. Right? Um, that's the reality. And this is 15% we're talking about. We're talking about a difference of almost 12%.
Now think about this as well. How how possible is it for you to get a 15% interest on a HELOC?
It's not.
It's impossible.
There's not
So
one that
let's
exists.
use a realistic number now.
At the highest interest rate on the HELOC market today is 11. That's
Mm-hmm.
the most you could spend on a HELOC right now.
So all things being fair,
All things this is the highest interest rate versus a fairly low interest rate mortgage, right? You would still be paying less on the highest current interest rate that there is in the market with this strategy
now,
versus the mortgage.
now let's use a realistic number, not even 3.2%, because that's not realistic anymore. We're talking about 2 years ago, right? 3.2%. Let's use today's interest rate
Well,
for a mortgage. Let
what
me look
that
that.
that was the client. The client got a 6.6 2 months ago.
2 months ago. Okay.
This was 2 months ago, right?
So let's look at the
But
mortgage
here's one thing I
interest
want to
rate.
do. Let's do this as well,
Do
Jamel.
7.5%.
We're
Do
gonna
seven
do
and a half
seven and
percent.
a half percent across the board so that you can see what we're talking
Fair
about.
enough.
Oh my goodness. So now if they were equal with this strategy, we're still on track for 5.42 because we ran it at 7.5 in the first place in the HELOC.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were in a mortgage, you're paying $676,868.55 on $270,000 with a 7.5% mortgage.
Now, do me a favor. Scroll up a little bit to the payment section or down, whichever way it went. I
Right
think
here.
it was down. Here's what scares people. All right. Now, you see the payment amount, right? So, what's the payment amount on the regular mortgage right here? The first payment.
So the payment amount on the regular mortgage, well, that's
$1,900, give and take.
yeah, that's telling you how much is. So you got that right here. Two
Right. So
thousand.
$2,600, right?
Yep.
Now, scroll down real quick. Now, show us the payment amount on the first payment for the HELOC.
Okay.
Here's the payment amount for the first payment on a HELOC. How much is that?
So it's an interest only loan. So the interest is $1,687.50, and then the income that comes in on top of that was $3,815.50 outside of the expenses for the client.
All right, so you got, let's say, a $3,800 payment, right?
That's how much the principal. Yeah, went towards the principal. Yep.
Versus a $2,600 payment, right?
Mm-hmm.
What the bank is doing is they're selling you on a lower payment.
Yeah, absolutely.
You understand? And that's what scares people. But as we've already debunked that earlier today, you're only going to do this if you're making enough money, right? Number one, if you can buy a house, then you can do this. The difference is where you're allocating the money. That's
Mm-hmm.
the key thing here. That I don't want you guys to get confused. You might have a $3,800 payment, let's just say, but all of your money is going into that payment. Then you're going to pull out the money in order to be able to pay your bills versus doing it the other way around.
Mm.
That's why this works. You understand? So, I'm only bringing that up because I know how people think,
Yeah.
right? A lot of people were like, "Hey, yeah, but that's a $3,800 payment. Yeah, but you're gonna have a $3,800 expense for the month anyway. You
Mm.
just gotta put the money into, you gotta allocate the money the right way.
Yeah, and
If you
the 3812 is going directly towards principal, which opens up the equity. So you might think of it as a $3,800 payment, and to use an analogy that would simplify that, it's $3,800 towards your savings account.
That's it. That's right.
That's it. $3,800
So
towards your savings
so it's just a different way.
account.
Yeah, you might have a lower payment for a longer period of time with a regular mortgage, but with the HELOC, it frees up the capital. So imagine you can't put money into a mortgage and be able to pull that money back out to be
No,
able to live off of. But
no,
with a HELOC, you can. And that's the key difference between the two.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I really want people to grasp this. Now, I will say, when isn't it for you? Right? Let's go ahead and because let's go ahead and show the good, the bad, the indifferent. My hope is that a client is not spending $7,000 a month with $8,500 of net income. And if they are, well, for this client, it wouldn't have made sense because his mortgage payment is $2,600, or his mortgage payment is fairly high. So if we look here, we'll see what his actual mortgage payment was. Now, in this situation, he's going to lose in the HELOC,
Mm.
right? There you go. That's how. That's a loss, right?
Hmm.
Now, why is he losing by that significant of a degree? Well, it's because he doesn't have any cash flow. He doesn't have any cash flow. So it can't do anything but pay the interest only. Right? And of course, if you pay the interest only, you're never going to pay the thing off. You're never going to pay it off. So for those who might look on the podcast and maybe see it, and they're looking at their finances and they're like, oh, yeah, I think I might want to do it. Take this into mind as well. If you are not building out some space, so if you look at your mortgage and it's like, okay, well, my mortgage is in place, how much of my mortgage makes up my expenses? If you start looking outside of the mortgage and you still have a very high expense to income ratio, there's something wrong,
Right.
right? It should not be this high. In fact, it probably should be this at the most. At the most. It shouldn't, because this is over 50%. So anytime you borrow, you're supposed to, your debt to income ratio, most people want it to be under 45%. So you can use that as a metric that if I'm not at 45% or under on my expense to income ratio without my mortgage being included, I'm not including the mortgage. Without the mortgage being included, this ain't for me,
Hmm.
right? If I'm not at that space. Now, granted, could it work? This is if he had $4,500 of expenses. It could still work. It still is better than the mortgage. With $8,500 of income, yes, it's still better than the mortgage, even with $4,500 of expenses, right? So that's more than 50% of expenses in that situation. That still makes it happen. Now, what changes those metrics is how much money is actually being borrowed, right? So, if it's a low amount of money being borrowed, obviously the interest rate is going to charge on a lower figure from the start, that will definitely change things drastically. But for him, and here's the other aspect that I would like to share with people. Why is this so powerful? Well, you start thinking about doing real estate. You start thinking about investing in anything. You start thinking about putting money into an insurance policy. So for this client, after he's paid off his home, it would take him 1.67 years to pay off $100,000, which means if he wanted to fund a retirement account and he was 30, let's say he was 30, I showed Jamel an example where there was an actual account that does not lose money that was on track for making $7.5 million without losing money, without being subject to market risk. And he was 32, right? Now, anybody can do that because of how numbers work. Most of you are trapped in a financial system that you really don't understand. Part of the financial system you don't understand probably is going to be on. We already discovered that you don't understand interest, right?
Mm.
But you also don't understand returns. So some of you are trapped into a retirement system that does not work. But my 401k, but my this. Jamel, I had a person whose financial advisor told him to sell his entire portfolio. He had
Wow.
$3.8 million of real estate, but he
Mm.
wasn't drawing the money that he should be drawing from the real estate. He had so many expenses, had to fix this, had to fix this. He had a bunch of mortgages on all of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so his financial advisor said, go ahead and sell it all and net about 1.8 million after capital gains and all this stuff, right? Now he wants to leave a legacy for his kids. That's a legacy, but he don't know how to leave it. He had a few $100,000 in a 401k, and guess what? Terrified to use the few $100,000, but
Mm.
he's considering liquidating the properties, right? And so I had to really help him to understand. Look, cash flow is everything, man.
Mm-hmm.
Cash flow is everything. If you are listening to us and you think about a financial system in any way, I want to go ahead and help you with something, whether it be retirement or anything that you have in mind. Retirement is passive income pulling time. That's all it is. In essence, it's cash flow time. Think about Social Security, cash flow, pension, cash flow. If you're drawing from an account, you are only drawing with the mentality of how much can I draw per month. Stop thinking about, oh, well, it has this large number connected to it, because if it has a large number connected to it and you're not counting taxes, you ain't counting other implications, you're working backwards. Focus on cash flow today. Focus on it today. And the reason why you need to focus on it today is because your focus is going to be divided with health problems and a number of different things the older you get. You won't be able to focus on cash flow because your budget is going to be forced on you. And even if you did have money to draw from, what I've seen from a lot of people, Jamel, is because they've gotten hit so many times when they touch money in different accounts, they're terrified to touch them even in retirement.
Crazy, man. So they
They're
never
terrified
living.
to touch them even in retirement. Just recently, J.P. Morgan Chase has a person, an over 80-year-old man, who's suing them because his financial advisor lost him $50 million in the market. And his response was he knew the risk. That was the financial advisor. He knew the risk, right? Now, the only reason why they say that is because you sign a whole bunch of legalese paperwork,
Which most people are probably not going to read.
which most people are not going to read, to place the liability on yourself and off of the advisor who is
Mhm.
advising you.
Most people they say sign here. You don't read it. They just sign.
They just sign. They just sign. So we're just having this conversation today because we see so many people who have these questions, or they make statements. Before you make a statement, book a call. Before you make a move, book a call. There's nothing wrong with getting more information about your particular situation and seeing if this works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Stop trying to do this alone. No man can do this alone. So,
It's the truth, though, man. It's
yes,
the truth, you know.
yes.
Yeah, man. So, if you had to provide our listeners with last words, man, what would those words be?
My last words would be so my sign isn't up here, but if you go to my website, you'll see Clayton Financial Solutions. My motto is you don't have to know someone to help someone. I'm trying to help you. I'm dead serious about trying to help you. If anybody has ever booked a call, you can put in a comment if you've done an appointment with me. Let people know they're actually getting help. It's not it's not conjecture, it's not theory. I'm not trying to sell you a Lamborghini, none of that. I want you to start thinking. In order for society to move forward, we have to be thinkers, not simply order takers or not simply just doing what has been set up for us. What makes entrepreneurs different is that they think outside of the box. The reality is, thinking outside of the box nowadays is just thinking in general.
That's it, man.
That's it. So,
Well, we definitely appreciate you hopping on today's podcast, man, continuing to educate the audience on
sure.
how to make better financial moves and how they can invest that money into more real estate and things like that in order to be able to support their future and be able to live a comfortable life
Absolutely.
not too far into the near future as well.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
look, man, obviously we're going to have you back. If you guys got any questions, leave a comment in the comment section. Let us know what questions you have in regards to what we spoke about today. If you agree with what we were talking about, if you disagree, leave a comment in the comment section. We're happy to entertain those those comments as well. But share this video with as many people as possible. Not too many people in our communities understand this type of information, and we need to be able to spread this information so that more people can make better financial decisions. So
Absolutely.
be sure to share this video. Be sure to like this so that it helps the YouTube algorithm. And be sure to subscribe to this channel if you want more detailed videos and podcasts and other content just like this. DeAndre, man, we appreciate you hopping on the line today.
Thanks,
And we look
man.
forward to seeing you guys on the next one. And I
Anytime.
hope that you benefited from today's podcast as well. We'll talk to you guys later.